All right, guys, let's move on to a bit of American English literature, in which we'll be dealing with Because I Could Not Stop for Death by the famous evergreen English writer, American English writer, Emily Dickinson. So, to have a basic understanding about Emily Dickinson is like she fundamentally she wrote about what she knew and about what intrigued her. So she was a keen observer of images, especially from nature, from religion, from law, from music, from commerce, from medicine, you name it, like fashion or domestic activities. And out of these, and apart from these few themes and all, she gave more importance to death specifically, as in the case of Sylvia Plath, another American writer. So uh, she dealt the theme of death in a wondrous manner, in a beautiful manner. So in this particular work, also in this particular poem, also you can see the beautifully decorated uh, words in order to design or define death as a gentleman's suitor. So that's the kind of approach in which Emily Dickinson uh, approached her poems. And death is personified in the poem Because I Cannot Stop for Death. So sometimes she deals with humor, sometimes with pathos. She writes about her subjects, by the way, remembering that she had a strong wit. Often helps to discern the tone behind her words. And uh, she had written kind of 1,500 plus poems in her lifetime, and out of the 1,500 poems that she wrote, only around 10 of her poems had a title. She titled only 10 of her works, and the rest of the poems Emily Dickinson wrote are it usually it is known by the first line of her poems. So that is the difference. So that's the special characteristics of Emily Dickinson's works. Uh, Many of her works deal with uh, personification as her special theme. All right, moving on to the poem, we have uh, Because I Could Not Stop for Death. He kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too for his civility. We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun. Or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill for only Gossamer my gown, my Tippet only Tulle. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. Since then, 'tis centuries and yet feels shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. All right, that's the poem by Emily Dickinson, starting with the line, Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. So death is, of course, personified and in capital letters, or described in terms of human characteristics throughout the literature. Death is actually in the form of a gentleman suitor. She's saying that the carriage held but just ourselves, me and the gentleman suitor. Alongside, we have another passenger as well, and that is immortality. That's also personified. Immortality is also personified here. So, death in the form of a gentleman suitor stops to pick the speaker and take her on a ride in his horse-drawn carriage. So, gentleman suitor stopped to pick the poetess up and take her on a ride in his horse-drawn carriage. Now, it was actually depicted in the 19th century, and it would have been shocking for a young, unmarried 19th century woman to take a carriage ride alone with a strange gentleman. So, in this instance, an escort named Immortality is also riding with them. That's the kind of taboos during that period is eminently placed here. This is another example of personification by giving immortality another status as a person here. So, in order to avoid a girl or a lady or a woman traveling alone with a gentleman suitor, she took the help of another person, that is immortality. So the poem's speaker offers no description of immortality. Now, you might imagine an ageless looking little woman in a grey dress. That's immortality. That's the kind of depiction given to immortality here, that we can give immortality. In any case, the poem's speaker hardly notices immortality's presence beyond a brief mention in line 4. The young woman's attention is completely, the poetess or the woman or the speaker, in fact, completely focusing her vision only on death, her gentleman caller. So that is the kind of approach which is made by Emily Dickinson. That was the passion and love towards death here by Emily Dickinson. And she's continuing by saying that we slowly drove. He knew no haste. There are many possible explanations that we can give for the slow speed of the carriage, which is driven by death, by the horses owned by death. Perhaps since the woman is now dead, there is a possibility that the woman is now dead, and the carriage is kind of been transformed into a hearse or an ambulance, wherein the dead bodies are being taken away to the graveyard, and they are moving at a slow pace, deliberate speed of the lead car of the procession, as you know. So another possible explanation is that death has no concept of time, At any time, death can come into action. Time and space are earthly concerns, and death is definitely the courier of souls from this particular world, the earthly world, to the unknown world. And it's not bound by such vague human concepts as well. So, death moves slowly. They were not in a haste as per the woman, the traveler. And I had put away my labor and my leisure too. Now she's saying that it's all because of this particular gentleman, death, my gentleman suitor, that I have put away all my labor, all my busy schedules, and even my leisure time too. So that means I have completely took a leave from my worldly life, my labor, my busyness, my schedules, my duties and responsibilities, along with my free time, my leisure time. I give up everything in order to, applause, in order to give support of the surprisingly charming an overwhelming attitude of the civility of death. I put away my labor and my leisure too for his civility, the civility of death, the gentleman suitor. While on the way, she's saying that while on the way we passed the school where children strove, possible explanation is kind of, she might be traveling via her school. We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring during the break. So it does not seem as concerned with where they are going. Death is not seen as concerned with where they are going as she does with the scenery along the way. So she's saying that children are playing, wheat growing. We're saying we passed the fields of grazing grain, saying that we have passed through the fields wherein you can see gazing grain, the full-fledged wheat. That's kind of, starting from the morning till the end. A full day is being depicted here in detail. Children playing, wheat growing, the sun setting. Taken for granted in the daily grind of life, these things grow more meaningful in relation to this final journey. The children are playing in a ring, and rings have magical significance for human beings because they are symbol of eternity. The rings. In our life, we believe that rings have this magical approach, or you consider it as the symbol of eternity over the years. The grain, in fact, it represents the natural world as she knows it. Only this time the grain seems to be gazing at her, or looking at her with great interest, and that too in bright color. The setting sun is, of course, another imagery in which she's saying that the setting sun is the universal clock. It's kind of boomerang. It comes back. The time comes back. The things by which humans measure their lives on earth, as they pass it by, she seems to pass into a new dimension. Moving ahead, she's saying that, or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill, for only Gossamer my gown, my Tippet only Tulle. She's saying that, the sun has set. Now it's night. And you can expect dews, you can expect snow, you can expect chillness of the body, death. The carriage, in fact, seems to be going so slowly as to be nearly motionless. Not in a haste as she was saying earlier. In any event, night appears to be falling means, and the chilly dew is settling in. That's the end of life. The references to the thinness of the woman's clothing. She's saying that, Gossamer my gown, the thinness of her dress. The final journey, during the final journey, she wore a kind of Gossamer gown, a full-length gown. And she's saying she had a Tulle tippet. The round her neck is an old-fashioned shawl, or a shoulder cape, as you can call it, made of Tulle, by the way. It's as silky as the Gossamer. But she's saying that when the sun sets and the dew came into action, what happened was that I'm growing cold. I'm feeling chilled. It's also yet another example of how she want to bring in the explanation, the depiction of death. She's saying that I'm feeling cold. and growing cold. It's another reminder that she's now dead. So she's expecting death. Moving ahead, she's saying, we paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. Very clear. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The swelling of the ground. Graveyard. The tomb. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible. The cornice in the ground. So naturally, centuries are longer than a single day. So she's saying, kind of, it's an excellent example of hyperbole and intentional exaggeration of house, which is seen as the swelling of the ground. That's the greatest revelation of all must be the moment when the mystery of death and the afterlife is revealed. Absolutely beautiful when she says that they stopped in front of a house, or we paused. We had a short break in front of a house that seemed the swelling of the ground. See how beautifully and naturally she uh, brought in such a great image into the poem. The natural swelling of the ground in contrast to the tomb wherein she is lying at the moment, her eternal rest. The roof was scarcely visible. The roof was scarcely visible. While on the way, we passed by and we have seen that there is a house, the swelling of the ground, but the roof was scarcely visible, and even the cornice in the ground, the cornice, the decorations on top of the tombstone are scarcely visible. So she's probably describing about her, the last day, because that day was the last day. The woman experienced kind of the temporal or time-related world. The memory of it is the last remnant of her previous existence. Last, moving towards the last stanza, she's saying, since then, 'tis centuries and yet feels shorter than a day. I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. So she is still looking forward for eternal life. It's the kind of expectation, that kind of great expectation, afterlife, death after life, eternity, things like that. Those kind of imageries are also bringing in. So sometimes the poetic experience is the closest thing to kind of knowing the unknowable, to experience death, wherein you haven't experienced death, you don't know how it would be. It's kind of knowing the unknowable. So in these final lines, Dickinson has attempted to describe what no living human can know. That moment, the meaning of forever becomes clear. Forever. Oddly enough, there is no bolt of lightning or clap of thunder. She's saying that I first surmised, meaning that she meant to say that the woman guesses through intuition, answer to the riddle of human existence. She looks at the heads of the horses as well. But first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. She's kind of feeling that the heads of the horses, they are pointed towards eternity. And suddenly she kind of remembers that immortality has been sitting beside her all along. The last sentence. Throughout the poem, you can see explanation or describing death and the beauty of death, in which she would like to uh, travel along with death. But at the same moment, in the end of the poem, she's saying that she's looking forward for eternity because I had a co-passenger as well, that is immortality. That is humane. Ultimately, human beings, even though they are sure or they are completely uh, they know completely about the imminence of death, that death might come next, the very next moment, the very next time or second. We're not sure about when and where does that action happens in your life. But at the same time, that particular point in your mind, in your belief, wherein you feel like you want to have an eternal life, you want to experience the path of immortality as well. So that's such a wonderful poem written by Emily Dickinson, describing death, describing immortality, describing her passions and her movements, the expectations of a person who would like to uh, go with death. All right. Thank you so much and have a nice day.